Hello and welcome to Upon Further Review, your weekly source for all things Summit Athletic Conference here in Northeast Indiana, as well as the NE8 and AC, and you name it, we have you covered. Alongside Eric Dukevich, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and after another week of football, we're heading now into week number 3 of what will be conference play again as we start to get into those games now that have a little bit more meaning. We had the opportunity to be out in New Haven this past week on Friday night and got to see a ball game that started off as looking as if it was going to be a hold on to your seat type of game with each team scoring on their first 2 possessions, Eric. But after that, it kind of was all New Haven, and from there, it was the Williams, Bates, Hardy, and Mylan Graham show.
Yeah, and a Johnny Washington, too. Don't throw him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great night out in New Haven. We were there for the week 3 version, now leading into week 4 here on Upon Further Review. And it was a fun crowd. I mean, we talked about it all the time, Coach. We primarily cover the SAC on our podcast and really on the radio side of things with the 1380 game of the week. But the opportunity to go out into NE8 country, to New Haven, John H. Young Stadium, and to see a really good New Haven team really kind of just manhandle, if you will, a Dekalb Barron team that was showing some bright spots early on this season. Both teams started 2-0 coming into this game. And by the end of the night, New Haven really showed that they are one of the teams in that upper echelon this season in conference play.
Yeah, no question. And I think the biggest thing that it really showed is the depth issue that that some of these teams face. DeKalb lost Lytle, their quarterback, who's a huge factor not only as the quarterback but as a safety. And the backup actually came in and did quite well and orchestrated 3 touchdowns in the third quarter and really put them in striking distance after the half, where New Haven had a pretty much control of the game. But those injuries hurt. I think we figured out that New Haven is real with what they've got as it pertains to as a football team. I think the biggest concern there is, can they remain healthy all year? I know up front they're facing some depth issues as well, and all those things are a possibility with these teams that don't have a size of roster like Carroll or Snider may have in the Summit Athletic Conference.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to, DeKalb came in, Aiden Lytle, their quarterback, the transfer from Garrett, originally a sophomore quarterback who played at Garrett, transferred to DeKalb for his junior season, sat behind Tegan Irk, now gets his chance, goes down with the injury. But I think, beyond that, really, no matter who was in the quarterback position for the Barons on Friday night, DeKalb just looked so good off the bat. I mean, they jumped out to a 28-7 lead, 35 then 42, and like you mentioned, probably change and put some backups in and some second and third stringers, and then was able to stay up late, the running clock scenario in the fourth quarter, but then also gave an opportunity for some of the younger players to play. And I think DeKalb closed that gap a little bit. But we talked about it all preseason and into the 3 weeks we've seen so far. New Haven, with all the weapons that they have, Johnny Washington transfers over from Concordia, Mylan Graham, the 5-star recruit, headed to Ohio State after high school, James Hardy, the 4th, lining up at tight end and defensive side of the ball too, getting some MAC looks. And then Donovan Williams, who was a really good quarterback, a dual threat kind of style, but then also too Trey Bates in the backfield, who's kind of that exclamation mark type of player. And it was great to see 461 total yards of offense, and really split down the middle almost, 274 yards passing and 187 rushing yards, 5 for 8 on third down. So New Haven was just clicking all night. And I think this is the type of New Haven team that we've been looking to see, a team that's won 5 straight seasons of 5 wins. Now they're sitting at 3-0, a solid win in conference, some solid play to begin the year, and really a force to be reckoned with, not only in the NE8, but as never too early to kind of look ahead to sectionals too, and the sectional that they'll be in, and some potential matchups there that could be very interesting. Coach, I think your mic's on mute there somehow.
There it is. I said the way that Donovan Williams played on Friday night was really pretty good. I mean, he only had maybe one mistake on one throw. But other than that, he was pretty much flawless as the night went on. So we'll come back to that game a little bit. I mean, as far as the rest of the Summit Athletic Conference went, and I think we're all pretty aware of, I think everybody won. I think the biggest game that was probably the biggest surprise to me was the Homestead Wayne game, that it was a 41-10 game and not much closer than that game to me was a little bit surprising in that regard, but the rest of the league, I think, all shook out the way we thought it would. Maybe the Northside Dwenger game may have been another one that maybe Northside could find their way into the win column, but all in all, I think between that and the NE8, and I think it all came out about how we thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, this first week of the SAC regular season was also a crossover week. So they set up the divisions, Division A with some of the quote unquote big schools, Carroll, Snider, Dwenger, Homestead, versus Division B schools, the smaller schools, so to speak. And so I think it right off the bat, it seemed kind of odd because you play the 2 non-conference games and then you get into conference play and it's cross-divisional. And so you're not having the big boys play the big boys. But nevertheless, I think it kind of bore out. Yeah, that Wayne Homestead game, 41-10 for Homestead. It was 14-10 at halftime. Homestead jumped out to a 14-0 lead in the first quarter, and then Wayne was able to kind of storm back in that second and get 10 points, a touchdown, and a field goal. And then it was just Homestead from there on out. So, we thought Wayne came into that game looking pretty sharp and a chance to kind of take that next step. They kind of falter there in their home game against Homestead. Homestead gets back on the right track. And that was huge for them because coming off those 2 losses, which are, very uncharacteristic, but obviously a new schedule type format for Homestead and for everybody in the SAC. So a lot of 0-2 teams that we're not used to seeing at 0-2 going into week 3. But I think Homestead really showed that, they're still a good team within the conference. And I think it does highlight, what happened to them the first 2 weeks of the season, and then go into week 3 and just kind of, steamroll that second half against Wayne. I think it really shows what we are trying to figure out is kind of that gap between the Fort Wayne schools and the Indy schools that as a conference and as an area, they're trying to shore up more and more as time goes on. So when we get later in the playoff rounds, those matchups become a little bit more competitive and maybe some of the Fort Wayne teams can win.
Well, that's true. And I think the biggest thing as we move forward here is each and every week will kind of get a little bit more important as it pertains to the 2 different divisions in terms of who's going to, come up on top. And we'll have to wait and see each and every week how that all plays out. And we're going to have some really good games coming up that we're going to be a part of, and looking forward to that. Tonight, we're going to have a couple guests with us. We're going to have Coach Tippman from the Snider Panthers, who've really came out of the blocks really nice in terms of where they came in terms of going down to a Warren Central, beating them pretty soundly in their backyard. And really then from that standpoint of really taking off beat a pretty good, I think, East Noble team. So we'll have Coach Tippman on here in just a second. And then we're going to have Kaden Hurst join us from Leo High School, the wide receiver that's really came on the scene this year. He is a Ohio commit at the moment. Remember, these are all verbals. These are not edged in stone, so to speak. And with the way he's playing right now, there may be some peaks from some of the Power Fives looking his way because he has that build and body in terms of that, and along with that, the speed. So he's someone to keep an eye on. We'll get a chance to talk to him a little bit here down the road, and then we'll get a chance to really kind of look forward to week 4 and see where we stand out with that and go from there. But let's get things off with Coach Tippman here from Snider High School. Kurt, glad you can be with us tonight. Appreciate you coming on here, even it's the holidays, so to speak. Big start for you guys. I think we all knew what Buchanan gave you as a running back in terms of his ability, big size, some speed, but you've really got production out of Billingsley, both running and throwing. Kind of talk about his maturity level here through the first two ball games of the year.
Well, Kieran he's been a quarterback since he showed up as a freshman. But then as he, got a little older and he was behind Hoppert last 2 years, he's a good enough athlete. We needed to get him on the field at other places. So, to continue to learn the offense, he played receiver and, still got some, we put him in the game at some crucial times last year just to, that backup guy, we really didn't think of him as a backup, but just he needed to get some of those reps. And I think, when you do that, everybody says, what the heck are you doing putting the backup quarterback in? Well, he really wasn't a backup. He's a very viable player last year in our offense, and we were just kind of giving him a different role. But to give him that kind of experience in the, it's one thing to do it at the end of the game when the score's kind of already decided, but to give him reps and give him time when the game's still in balance, I think those are invaluable. And I think his hot start, can be attributed a little bit to he has experience, and he was in some of the fray last year as a junior and, under center or running the offense. And he looks very, very comfortable, he didn't get rattled at all. That first game down in Indianapolis and, everybody in Fort Wayne saw Warren Central had some dudes on defense when they played Carroll up here, but he didn't get rattled. They kind of punched us in the mouth in the first quarter down there, and Kieran was the leader in just staying the course, not panicking, not having to change a bunch of stuff, just settle down, and ended up making some really big plays in that game to lead our offense. But his development has kind of been on course with what we've seen from him all along. He's a very calm, cool, collected kid, and he's a point guard in basketball, runs track, 3-sport athlete that doesn't get rattled by all this. He's been a competitor, and I think that's one of the selling points of being a 3-sport athlete. They're competitors. They compete, and there's just no substitute for competing. Whether it be bringing the ball up the court when the score's tied in the fourth quarter and you got to get a bucket, or he ran in the state meet in the 4x100 in track. Those experiences you just can't duplicate, and it's, I think, showing for him and our offense here early in the season.
Well, the other positions that you've been getting some great production at, of course, is running back with Uriah Buchanan, and then of course Ganaway on the outside. Those have kind of been the other two big bodies out there. What about tell us a little bit about their production, and how they've fared thus far for you in terms of kind of how you would have seen them getting the ball and kind of trying to target them to get them the football as being those guys that are going to make plays for you.
Well, Uriah was a key part of the offense last year, kind of shared time with Langston. Langston got the majority of the load, and really when it came down to determining time in the offense, the senior was in there, but Uriah was very capable. I think Lettuce did the majority of the work in the Homestead game, which was a really close game last year. And so we knew, he was very capable. And then to watch him work in the off season has really been phenomenal. I mean, from the time we started doing some things in the spring, he was out there designing drills on his own or with Coach Davis. He's an ultimate worker and very, very dedicated to working on his craft, and has, one of the coolest things to see as a coach is when he makes some of these great cuts in the Warren game or the East Noble game. You see those same things of what he'd been working on the field in practices in the spring and the summer, kind of on his own. You see it show up on the field, and just a credit to his tremendous work ethic. So, he's a very capable guy, and we're always going to begin our offense with being able to run the ball. We believe firmly that if you're going to win in November, you better be able to stop the run and better be able to run the ball. Weather in Indiana is such that you got to be able to run the ball, and I think with that being our mantra, he's taken the lead in being the kind of the point man with the running game. But then, in the receiving core, we lost 3 really, really good receivers last year, and with the quarterback, we were able to chuck it around last year, and 3 senior receivers, and Kedrell Billingsley and Kamari and Jordan Lee. Those guys were very experienced and very successful. And so bringing 3 new guys and 4 new guys, that haven't had much experience. Austin, you mentioned Ganaway, he was one of our safeties last year. So he was on the other side of the ball. And just because of the way we need to move some guys around, he's kind of looked at home over there at receiver, and, has added another dimension. He's a tall, big kid with good hands and good speed. And then Boston Conley is a kid that has worked 3 years as a receiver in the offense and kind of bided his time. And, as typical with a lot of kids, their senior year, it's time for them to shine, and has really stepped up, had a nice touchdown catch Friday night against Concordia. And then at the other spot, we have a new kid, John Stegmeyer, who is has been an all-conference, maybe an all-state soccer player the last 3 years. And had decided coming into his senior year that he wanted to try football. Played as a young kid, but, when in the high school season, soccer and football conflict, and so chose soccer, but has tremendous speed, tremendous athleticism, and wanted to try soccer, and has been a great addition to us out on the perimeter. Is deceivingly fast. He probably, in our top 3 in terms of speed on the whole team. And then a junior, Trevor, is the 4th guy that kind of shares time there. And, the 4 of those guys together have really shown the ability to run the offense and execute the passing game to a good level that has allowed us to be successful.
Sure. Head coach for Snider, Kurt Tippman, joining us tonight on Upon Further Review. Coach, your defense too, all season long, the big win at Warren Central, and following that up, and just looking East Noble, a clash up there. Then you take care of business at Concordia. Just talk about that unit and what they've been able to do so far. We know about Brandon Logan. We're starting to hear his name more. Levi Oberhoser, another name that somebody told me hey, watch out for this kid in the secondary, that linebacker core with Lucas Rohrbacher. Just talk about that Snider defense, that was able to really look strong on Friday night, get that first string group of guys get their work done early, but ultimately too, just all season long, that part of the success for the Snider Panthers so far.
Well, going into the season, we had some returning guys at all 3 levels. On the D line with Will Kelso, and then at linebacker with Lucas. And then in the secondary with Brandon Logan And Levi played a lot for us last year too. So we had experience at all three levels, but then, lost some really talented players as well. So we had a lot of question marks in terms of how we were going to be. We knew we'd be fast, maybe a little undersized, but speed and we designed our scheme to try to take advantage of some of our speed, and try to compensate for some of our lack of size. We're not going to be 270 pounds, in the interior like maybe some of the years we've had in the past. So, going into the Warren Central game, had lots of question marks, and really, with Warren Central returning what was a really, really good offensive line. I think they had 4 of their 5 guys coming back, from an offense last year that ran the ball very well in the MIC, and just, really, really good up front. We knew we'd get a lot of those questions answered in week 1, and our guys weren't overpowering, but what they did was just play good, fundamental, sound gap defense. If I'm a defensive tackle and I had to get to this particular gap, the guys got there and defended that gap. And, we really played good, sound team defense. Nobody out of position, nobody getting overwhelmed on the line of scrimmage, and just holding gaps and holding to positions to where they needed to be so that the 11 guys could kind of work together. And, that was the most pleasing aspect of that first game defensively, was just not getting overwhelmed by a really, really good offensive line and playing good, sound gap defense. And, we continue to run to the ball well, and, our secondary guys were flying around and kind of got tested in the same way against East Noble. East Noble's a big physical, run the ball kind of offense, and kind of do some different things, try to, schematically get some advantages with some of the formations they use and motions and things like that, and required a bunch of adjustments by the defensive guys and learning some of those things in a week game plan. And again, our guys responded well to that challenge, and, did a good job in what I think is a really good offense in East Noble, and both being able to run the ball and throw the ball. I think they're very capable of both and going to be a force in that conference, offensively, and did a good job of that. And we've always thought we're going to have some speed, and we got some guys that can play in the back end. And Jamarion, I think, showed that Friday night with 2 interceptions, just really tight coverage, and has a great ability to play the ball. One of those really good ball skills, and Brandon and Levi back there at the safety position, do a good job of disguising things, and then, can break on the ball and make some really special plays. So they're
Sure.
leading us back there. And I think it's a defense that's going to have to play fast and have to employ a lot of scheme to combat some of the size disadvantages. But I think that, that's kind of the way we want to play. We want to play with speed, and, I'd rather be fast than big and slow at any time. Defensively. So I think it allows us to have a lot more variety in what we're doing schematically on defense.
Sure. So for you, Coach, too, a lot has been made about and we kind of talked about it preseason a little bit too, but the SAC, the non-conference slate. For you, picking Warren Central and East Noble, you were one of the first teams, it seemed like, to come out and say, oh, we found our opponents. Why was it so important for you as the Snider Panthers and your coaching staff and the players in a program to go out and get those 2 teams right off the bat, non-conference play, a team like Warren Central? What was it about that matchup that you guys felt we need a game like that off the bat, and the success that came out of it, obviously?
Well, we wanted to find, we wanted to play the best teams in the state. I mean, honestly, that was our goal, to schedule, what we think are the best teams in the state. And so, when that schedule first opened up, we emailed and contacted all the teams in the MIC and all the teams in the conference with Westfield and Hamilton Southeastern, Fishers, and those schools, because in my opinion, the 6A state champions have come out of those 2 conferences, or the teams playing in the state championship have come out of those 2 conferences, since 6A was really formed. And, we've had experience playing them. We played Lawrence Central in the state championship in 2012. We've played Ben Davis. We've played Warren Central. We've played Carmel many times in the regional. We've played Hamilton Southeastern and Fishers, and just, know those programs and know how good they are, and knew that it would be a great way of measuring and finding out, where we were as a team, in a week 1 or week 2 matchup, getting ready for a conference schedule. I think when you play really well-coached teams that are also talented, the talent's part of that too, because all your mistakes get accentuated and exaggerated when you're playing a team that's well-coached and talented. You can make some mistakes against lesser teams and they're not as visible, they're not as apparent. But when you play a really well-coached team that has talent, all those things get exaggerated and kind of make it easy for you to identify the things you're not very good at. And that was our goal. And, additionally, any other program that was just well-coached and, the programs that do a good job year in and year out, they're always going to be well-prepared. And I think we found that in both Warren Central and East Noble. And, it wasn't like we had the pick of everybody. There were a lot of places we contacted that their contracts were in different years. So there wasn't the availability. If you remember when that happened, at the same time, the MIC was kind of going through a change with Center Grove and Carmel. And so they weren't sure if their schedules were going to change, if their week 1s and week 2s were going to be open or not. So there was some delay in a lot of the availability of some of those MIC teams. And, Warren Central week 1 was scheduled to play, and they had been playing Center Grove. But then when Center Grove left the conference, that's what allowed us to get in there. And, it worked out really well. And I think, win or lose going, we also wanted a place where we could travel. We just don't travel in our conference schedule. And then you get to the playoffs and having to go to a Mishawaka or a Valpo or someplace like that up in Maryville. We don't want that to be our first road trip, and going to Northside 5 minutes away or to Dwenger 3 minutes away, it just isn't the same as getting on the bus and going for 2 hours. So we also wanted to experience a road trip. Now, we didn't plan on having both games be road trips, but that's just kind of the way it worked out.
Yeah.
But I think that'll pay dividends for us down the road, just having that experience and having done that at least once or twice, all points towards being our best week 10 when we start playing, in the playoffs.
Certainly. Well, it's paid off for you so far, Coach. The Snider Panthers up to number 1 in Class 5A in both polls and off to a 3-0 start. They host you first home game of the season this Friday night after 3 road games as you welcome the Southside Archers into town. And we want to thank you for joining us tonight, Coach, and best of luck the rest of the season. I'm sure we'll talk to you and some of your players throughout the rest of the year, and we'll certainly keep our eye on Snider.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thanks so much. That's Kurt Tippman, head coach of the Snider Panthers, joining us on Upon Further Review, Coach. And, what a good start it's been for the Snider Panthers. The tough schedule and 2 very good opponents in Warren Central and East Noble, and then get into conference play and, take care of business. And they're sitting pretty atop the division so far, along with Carroll and Homestead, and you throw some of the other schools in there on the smaller side of things. Lures is all of a sudden in the SAC race again as well. So I think it should be an interesting one come the rest of the year. They got it pretty easy, I would say, against Southside this weekend, and Carroll comes up in a couple weeks, and after that we start to see this big time matchups that we're used to in the SAC.
Yeah, and they've got, like you said, Carroll in 2 weeks and Homestead after that. So the biggest challenge he'll have is keeping his guys from peeking forward and not keeping their eye on what's at hand right now. And so that's going to be a huge thing that he'll work on this week. But Kurt will have it well in hand, because all he does, he gets his kids to focus on the here and now. And right now they're on a roll, just like the next young man that's going to be on it's on a roll right now with the Leo Lions, and that's Mr. Kaden Hurst. Kaden, How you doing, my man?
Oh,
You got your mic mute, man. Let's get his.
You hear
There
me?
you
I'm
go.
good.
There you
yeah,
go.
we can hear you.
What's up? What's up?
How are you, Kaden? Thanks for joining us tonight. We talked about hot starts. You know, Snider's one of them, and so are this Leo Lions team. I mean, and you have just made that big impression. Just coming into Leo, you know, first season with them, and the impact you made already. Just talk about joining into that team and really how it's kind of been so favorable for you so far joining the Leo Lions.
I mean, it's been great. It's a great community, and like right once I got there, I said on the 260 podcast, it's just been like welcoming. I mean, I had no problems. It feels like a family. So I'm here. It's the perfect fit for me.
What makes it the perfect fit for you? You know, is it the wide open offense? A lot of other playmakers. I mean, what is it for you that you found such a good fit for you so quickly in coming over to Leo? Sorry, Leo. Yes.
It's my teammates. I mean, because I got a great bond with every single one of them. So I mean, and I feel like I'm able to play good because I have great teammates that I'm surrounded with.
Sure.
Kaden, talk a little bit too here about kind of I think most people have recognized you coming on the scene of late as your ability to return kicks, and you kind of returned the first two kickoffs of the opening games the last 2 weeks with Kokomo and Angola. What have been some of the things there that have enabled those big returns to work out for you?
I would say it's the way the return is.
Oh, that's on. Sorry, you're good.
Oh yeah, my bad. I would say it's the way the return is. I feel like is there two of me? Okay.
We had two of you on there. Just
so I feel like it's the way the return is set up. I mean, when I got great blocking, I'm able to catch that ball, see that hole, and just run straight through it. I mean, and it's the opening kickoffs too, and it gets us off to a great start. I mean, because then that brings a lot of energy, and then my teammates, they go on the field and do their thing.
Yeah, let's also let's talk a little bit of being on a team that's got other power, 5 recruits and Brock and some other guys that are there. You've really got an offense that is built around more than just yourself. I mean, you've got Brock at the tight end spot, and you've got some other guys around you that help enable your opportunities. Talk a little bit about your teammates surrounding you that you're getting a chance to play with this year.
I mean, I feel like every single one of my teammates that's on the field, no matter who it is, they're ready for it and they can do it. I mean, we got a great running back core, so we can run the ball, we can pass the ball. We got a great quarterback too, so even he can run the ball a couple times and he's got a couple yards. But I mean, I just feel like we have threats all around, so it helps us out because if a team tries to stop us doing one thing, we can just go to the other thing.
Well, you got a big one coming up this week after, you guys have taken care of Angola and Norwell back to back after a tough one down at Kokomo. When have you guys started your prep for New Haven this week or yet?
Yeah, so we started in film on Saturday morning. We got the Friday night, enjoy that victory, but on to the next game. So we got started with New Haven.
Sure. Kaden, I got to ask you, the early start that you've had and the success. I mean, we look at it. What hurts the most, to reference a Rascal Flatts song, if you will, versus Norwell? You had the 85-yard interception return for a touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and rush for 80 yards. Versus the Angola, it was the 86-yard kickoff return and a 60-yard rushing touchdown. And then Kokomo, the 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Is there a part of your game that you like more? Is it the running back, run backs, on the returns on kickoffs, on special teams? Is it getting it out in the open field and striding down the sideline? What is it about your game that you like the most, or like to show off a little bit, so to speak, but also really what have you honed in on in the last year or so, to kind of open the eyes of some of the college programs around the area, as you try to as you head into the recruiting area, and just kind of get your name out there in that regard?
I would say return. I wasn't really like a returner, but it happened, and I mean, I feel like it's great returning the ball, because like once you see that hole, you just go full speed and go score a touchdown. And I mean, I feel like I like that a lot too. And I'm interested to see who's like still gonna kick it, because as soon as I kick it, it's more excitement coming. I mean, it's another return that I could have, and my teammates great blockers. I mean, it just brings a lot of energy to the team.
Yeah, well, and it's great to see. I mean, it's electrifying, and we talk about it every week, here on our show, and on the pregame show on 1380 The Fan, just how those type of big plays can really lift a sideline and change the dynamic of the game. What is it like down there when you run 99 yards to the house off a kickoff? I mean, what's going through your mind as you see that hole, and you're running through it and finding pay dirt?
So once I see that hole, I'm like, all right, you got to go. Like, you can't get caught. I mean, my teammates set me up perfectly, so now it's my job to finish it, and I can't get caught. So that's what I'm always thinking. That's why, like, sometimes you see my head moving around, because I'm just trying not to get caught. And then, I mean, once I score and I turn around, it's just fun to see, like, my teammates, celebrating, the crowd, the coaches. It's just good to see everybody excited.
Kaden, talk a little bit about recruiting here before we let you go tonight. You made, you had a lot of MAC offers on the table, and you made a decision to go ahead and commit to Ohio U. What was the reasoning behind that commitment now?
I would say because Ohio, it felt more like Leo. Like, Leo is, I feel like it's a big family here. Once I got to meet the coaches, some of the players, once I got on campus, I saw how the receivers train and stuff, and like I could relate to them and stuff. And I really like that, because I like their mentality and how they want to do things. And the coaches are great too. And I just knew it was for me.
Have you been getting other contact from maybe some of the Power 5 schools like, Purdue, Indiana? Has there been any other schools contacted you beyond this after the kind of the verbal commitment?
No, I just the same coaches from schools that I have offers from. Nothing bigger.
Okay. No, I just wondered, with all the production that you've had in a short period of time, whether or not that had maybe brought some other people into the fray as it pertains to your recruitment and stuff. So I'm glad that you've made that decision. I know that's a big one to kind of get off your plate, and now you can worry about just your, playing ball and your grades and stuff, and you're not worried about what may or may not come ahead of you. So I commend you for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, Kaden, we appreciate you coming on tonight to talk a little bit about you. I know you've kind of shown right in the first couple of weeks of the season, and turned some heads and gotten some people giving you some notice, as well as the Leo Lions. And it's great to see the season that you've had so far, and the exciting player that you are, and certainly somebody we'll be talking about all season long here on Upon Further Review. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and good luck to you and the Leo Lions the rest of the way.
All right, yeah, see you guys. Thank you for having me.
All right, that was Kaden Hurst, the talented wide receiver and kick returner for the Leo Lions coach. And man, talk about electric player. He has really changed the dynamic, even for a very good Leo team.
Well, yeah, and they're kind of built a little bit like New Haven in that regard, just from the standpoint of the amount of talent they have offensively speaking, and it's also translating to defense. I mean, they lost to Kokomo by a couple points, and I think that was more of one of those games that kind of came down to a couple plays here and there. Now they've gone on and handled Angola and Norwell rather easily, and now they've got their the teeth of their schedule coming into them, because they got New Haven this Friday, then they've got East Noble, and then they will again pick up some hard games there towards the end of the year with Columbia City. So the next 2 weeks for them are going to be a big opportunity for them to really grasp a hold of that NE8 race. If they could get by both the New Haven Bulldogs and East Noble. And so I think that's going to be the key thing there for them moving forward in the NE8. But I tell you, this game this Friday, it's going to be probably one of the better games in the area that we'll have. And it may be the best game of the football season because of what's going to be on the field running around on Friday night.
Yeah, certainly in that regard. And not only that, the implications in the NE8, the long story tradition, the East Allen schools competing against each other. We're talking New Haven and Leo at Leo this Friday night. And I think, that's what we talk about. We primarily cover the SAC here, but at the same time, the ability to see some of these other conferences have big time matchups that, a school like East Noble or a school like Leo or an Adams Central that has built their program up long term, where, each and every week their game can be under consideration for the game of the week.
Yeah, no question. And then we can't leave out, with the ACC right now is Heritage, because they had a big win again this week against Woodland. And I'm trying to see who they got next on the
South Adams at Adams Central next week.
Yeah, right. So there's another big game that's on the docket this week as well. And I think that one is going to be another game in the Allen County area that is also going to garner some, great crowds in that regard. And it's interesting because Heritage has got to go to Adams Central twice. I just looked it up. They got South Adams this week, and they're playing at Adams Central because South Adams turf field is still not ready. I think it's not going to be ready for a couple more weeks. But then right after that, they play Adams Central again, back down at Adams Central. So they've got back-to-back games. Now, Heritage comes out of those two games with wins. They're in control of the ACAC because they would have played the top two teams in the league. Now, after that game, they go to a non-conference game against LaPel. So they'll actually step out of conference, and then they finish up with Bluffton, Southern Wells, and Jay County. So the next 2 weeks for the Heritage Patriots is going to be quite important when it comes to controlling their own destiny in the ACAC, because after these two, I would say Bluffton would be the next.
Yeah, Bluffton. We can't sleep on those Tigers. Yeah.
Will be their next contest after LaPel. So you can only imagine what's coming about here in a couple more weeks for Heritage. So we're getting to that point of the year, about week 4 and 5, right there in the middle of the schedule, where we're going to start seeing these games that are going to have a big input on what will happen in the conference championships.
Yeah. And real quickly, Coach, before we move on to this week's game, just kind of putting a bow on the SAC for the week. Carroll with this 78-6 win over Southside. I mean, that was just all Carroll all the time. I think I saw somewhere from outside the huddle or something, most points scored on Southside in school history, 102 years of the school. Dwenger, we kind of touched on it, gets the big win over Northside to get in the win column Dwanger now 1-2, Northside 0-3. Quickly, Coach, your thoughts on that game, and really Dwanger had to rally because they were down 14-0, I think, at the end of the first quarter, or 12-0, I should say, because Northside only scored 12, but 21 unanswered for the Saints.
Yeah, and Jim Shevlin at the our pregame show had talked about a gentleman by the name of Carter Minix, and he got himself in the receiving columns for a touchdown, a pretty big one, as a matter of fact. But they needed to win. Unfortunately, Northside needed to win, and for them to lose a game where they had the lead, that one stings probably a little bit more in that regard, because you have things in your control and you lose it because of whatever may have happened in that game. But no, they're getting, Dwanger's one of those teams that once they find their identity, and that's the one thing I think with them the last couple of years is trying to find it. Last year they were hurting at quarterback. It is trying to find that identity as a team, and they played some, they came out of 2 games that, Brownsburg and Cincinnati Moeller. They're lucky they got, they didn't get really beat up. Not to say that they didn't, but they could have been really beat up. But now that they're in conference play, now they got their chance they got the victory that they needed. It puts them right square in the middle of it, and they've got everybody in front of them. So those teams like Carroll, Snider, even a Homestead, they all control their own destiny. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting as we get through the thick of this conference schedule here as we get going.
Sure. And the other Bishop that gets the win over on Friday night is Bishop Luers. They get a big win at Northrop, 37-14. Kind of figure out their way. Big a defensive night for them. Damian Jackson kind of jumped off the page. That was a name that we heard out there. I know Gio Jimenez got 2 tutties on the ground. So definitely a winnable game for Luers, more kind of the Luers that we expect when kind of within the conference there, Coach.
Yeah, and I was trying to see, I know it was one of those games that they really battled in that game. They fought some demons, but they finally got themselves in a position where they started taking advantage of miscues and mistakes. And, again, there's another team that desperately needed a win. They're kind of like Dwanger in that regard. They needed a win for confirmation, and they got it. So it's the big thing is, can they build upon these wins for those schools after they've, started off as rough as they did? And Luers, let's face it, Luers losing to New Haven isn't a big shock. I don't think that anybody should look at.
Not anymore.
No, right. But we knew before the season that New Haven athletically had all the athleticism that they were going to need. It was just a matter, can they put it together consistently? And I'll say this, and I said it on the radio, that was probably one of the best offensive coaching games that I've seen in a long while, in terms of New Haven's offensive coordinator and coaches really utilizing formations, motions, and establishing the run game and passing game, to me, in a long while, because they had a great game plan. They stuck to it. They came back to things. They did some things, and it just really made it hard on Dekalb. And I would imagine that's the way it's been for the last couple of weeks with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at Luers, you talked about it. They had to put some demons away. They jump out to a 21-0 lead on Northrop in the second quarter, and then Northrop gets right back in it, 21-14, and then Luers pulls away in the third and into the fourth quarter. So they were able to figure it out and put it all together. But there again, talking about Northrop, a team that has struggled in the win column, but there again, when they can find little glimpses and stick their beak in there, potential. And I mean, if it wasn't maybe the slow start and going down 21-0, maybe we're talking a different game there for sure between those two teams. And then another one we talked about it with Snider and Concordia. They win big over Snider wins big 52-6, and then the Homestead beats Wayne 41-10. So looking at the divisions at this point, Carroll and Snider and Dwenger all 1-0, and Homestead. So 4 of the 5 bigger schools in the A division are 1-0. Northrop sits at 0-1. In the small division, Lures, the only team to win on Friday night in that division. They're 1-0. And remember, the ultimate SAC champion is decided on overall conference record. So we don't have division champions who play a championship game or anything like that, where we're awarding a conference champion, which potentially could be multiple based on the overall record. So that kind of does it for week 3. And Coach, we now move the chains to week 4. And this week, I tell you, not the best bunch of games. We do have Dwenger at Carroll, which kind of highlights things. I think Lures at Wayne is going to be good, but this one is not, it's within the division this week. The first divisional games for the most part, except for Southside and Snider. But I think you probably put all the, a lot of stock in the Dwenger Carroll game. And as we move to week 4, it should say there. But so the important thing is you play and who's in front of you, and it's some opportunities for some teams to take that next step.
Well, you're right. And, the other team on that list that's going to needs a victory, and that's, Northside, and they play Concordia. And it's not to say that they're going to go into Concordia and get a victory. They're going to have to go into Concordia and earn it, because right now they're sitting there at 0-3, and they're looking for their first win. I think the other team that has to be cautious on their game plan this week is a team like Homestead. We've seen them get the big win at Wayne and did it soundly, coming off a big loss at Noblesville. And now they play a team like Northrop, and Northrop has given Homestead some fits through the years. So I think that's a game that you kind of have to keep an eye on, because Homestead still has a ways to go from an offensive perspective to get themselves, into the right category with a young quarterback to keep the things rolling. So I think as it stands right now, we're going to be out at Carroll in the Dwenger game on Friday night at 7:00 with our 6:00 pregame show. But from the other perspective, there's some games in there that may or may not end so well for some teams. And that's the hard part when you get into some of these mismatches. And that's why the divisions make so much sense now, because these teams have a chance to look forward to something as opposed to just, banging their head against the wall each and every week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and looking on the other side, we talked about Carroll Dwenger a little bit, but Lures and Wayne, another one where it's interesting because, in the B division, I guess we got to stay away from big and small because Wayne's a 4A school. But anyway, the Lures at Wayne, Wayne came in against Homestead 2-0, things looking really good, and then things just went south in a hurry for the Generals. Now they have another home game. They welcome in Bishop Lures, who they're again looked impressive towards the end of the game. And now all of a sudden this game does become a little bit bigger because Wayne, the old proverbial not making one loss turn into two. And that's what you kind of face here with the Wayne Generals.
Well, right. And I think it's, that's another game that I think is going to be a pretty good game from the standpoint of where both teams are heading into this week. Wayne, I'm sure, will look at the game and figure out what they did wrong because they've got too much talent not to be somebody that loses a game to Homestead like that. I like I said, I was a little bit surprised, but that Lures game will be a chance for them to right the ship within that division. And I think they've got the excellent opportunity, just like Lures now has that confidence of getting, affirmative results from a game that, like you said, at one point in hand, then all of a sudden it got out of hand, and then they got it back in hand. So that's going to be a good ball game as well Friday night.
Sure. Going down the list, Northside and Concordia, two teams that are, have not won yet on the year. I think probably this matchup probably was not as intriguing, perhaps, 2 or 3 weeks ago, but all of a sudden, I mean, this is probably a must win for Northside in the scheme of where they are as a program, but also for Concordia, a very winnable game, because for 3 weeks, with Snider was a struggle, obviously, but they can show that they can throw the ball around. And so the question is that secondary for Northside. Of course, now they have Tay Johnson back, so that's the big X factor for that Northside team. Great to have him back out on the field. And so this one becomes suddenly a big one, not too far apart from each other.
Well, like I said, both are looking for that first win. Like you had mentioned, Concordia's ability to throw the football. Now they had a hard time against a really good Snider defense. Snider has an excellent defense, and it's going to be hard for a lot of people to move it on Snider, running it or throwing it this year. But we're going to find out Friday night on what may or may not occur in that game. Coach Manigal, I've said before, he's a really good football coach. He does a pretty good job of putting players in the best possible positions. It doesn't always work out when you're outclassed, like they were against Snider. So, this week's a different story because you got a Northside team coming in that's licking their wounds. I mean, it's gone probably in a lot of people's eyes exactly opposite of what they thought it was going to go. And when that happens, there's, that's when you have the doubts creeping in your head, and that's what they don't need.
Absolutely. And then the last one on the slate there, Southside at Snider, I think, they're, again, a very favorable matchup for the Panthers. Come home, their first home game of the year after 3 road games. First time since 1988 Snider has had the season start out with 3 road games. But you got to feel good about where you are at Snider right now. Another opportunity to get up early and sit some of your starters and get a good first quarter in, and then let some of the younger guys play, which, Coach, is valuable to the success long-term of a program, is to get the second string, the third string, maybe even trickle into the JV to get those guys in there and get them that varsity experience as maybe sophomores.
Well, you heard Kurt tonight talk about that with what they did with Kieran Billingsley in terms of putting him in positions a year ago to get important reps during a game that had, some meaning to it. So whether it's him or other players at other positions, it's just as valuable as anything. So, we've got those games coming up. I mean, you've got the New Haven Leo game that's taking place in the NE8. Now East Noble goes to DeKalb. If DeKalb can get some players back that they lost on Friday, that'll be a big boost to them. But I will say the Weber kid that came in to replace Lytle at quarterback actually did well. And I think that they still have some chances there because what he does give them, the Hinkle kid is a phenomenal specimen. Yeah. He's 6'4", 230, and he's a tailback. It's crazy. And then of course in the ACAC, the big matchup there with Heritage and South Adams this week. That's going to be a huge matchup in terms of ACAC, possibilities as it comes down to the end of, and them going for what I say, AC. They got Adams Central then after this. So, Heritage right now has got a 2-week haul where they've got a lot of things in front of them and everything to gain from it if they can come out on top.
Yeah. And then that out of conference matchup with LaPel, then Bluffton, Southern Wells, and then Jay County, which is a team that we don't talk about a lot with because they're so far out, kind of in that Northeast Indiana geographical area, but a team that has completely different from where this team was, just 2 or 3 years ago. 34 points a game, 9.3 on defense allowed. A completely different Jay County team still on the schedule for the Heritage Patriots. So a long way to go for all these conferences, really. And Coach, we touched on it a little bit. Friday night, we're back at it with our 1380 game of the week with our friends at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Bishop Dwenger at Carroll. Kickoff at 7 o'clock from Carroll Stadium. And then, of course, we'll be on for the PSM High School Football Tailgate pregame show at 6. You, me, and Shannon. Or you are Shannon, you, me, and Jim. Boy, it is Labor Day weekend going into a new week, isn't it? And then you and Brett Rump will have the call at 7. And then, of course, Pine Valley Pizza Hut, the place for the postgame show. 7 hours of coverage when you throw in the sports rush. Just a great time on Friday night. We cover all the games and talk about all the different teams in our area. And we'll have another big one Friday night, Coach, as Dwenger comes to Carroll.
Yeah, a big one. And, again, it's a chance for Bishop Dwenger to try to get themselves in a position with the Summit Athletic Conference. And Carroll, too, is, it's going to be important for them, because even though they played Southside and had a great showing, Dwenger's a different story. And that doesn't mean that they're going to come out and hang 70 on them this week. And I've said all along, Carroll's problems offensively has been that they've got to be able to run the football. I think they were able to establish some of that Friday night against Southside. Now it's got to carry forward to Dwenger, because they're going to have to be able to run it against a team like Snider when those teams match up here in a couple weeks, which should be a dandy on that regard. One thing I wanted to point out before we let everybody go tonight, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when our videos are up and running. Of course, you can follow us each and every week on Twitter and Facebook. We do have the website, upon further review, sac.com, where you have everything in one place. You can go there to listen to different podcast, video casts from this week, last week, or even some of last year. But go ahead and join us there on that. Thanks to Kurt Tippman and Kaden Hurst for joining us here tonight. And remember, the pregame show will start at 6 o'clock live from Carroll High School. We'll love to have you there with us. And until next time, for Eric Dukevich, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. This has been Upon Further Review. We'll catch you next Friday night.